I just. Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the East Dubuque City Council meeting. It is Monday, June 17th. I ask that you please turn your cell phones off during the meeting and please be quiet during discussions. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 24-0612, call to order.
Belkin.
Here.
Bergmeyer.
Here.
Dagenhart.
Here.
Mayor Digman.
Here.
Fleur. Meyer.
Here.
Roby.
Here.
Attorney Hess.
24-0613, staff reports. City manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. So you probably noticed the other item in the room, the screen in the back. This is part of our effort to be able to have a better discussion and better transparency on especially on our financial things, but also on the presentations we get, and to be able to make sure we're all looking at the same thing. The financial side, we are very close to being able to have the work on the reports that are going to come to you on a regular basis. The April was just closed out, which means that the 24 fiscal year is done and balanced from our internal perspective and ready to go to the auditor. We do need to, we're working on the RFP to go out to select a new auditor. And so that'll become the next major priority on the financial side of things. But we thought it would be good to be able to, when we talk about numbers, sometimes it's hard when you got a packet or you got a sheet of paper in front of you. And I think this is a good way to be able to look at things. So of this, we bought the stand and the screen. And thanks to Pam and Des, they managed to dig around and find all the other equipment that was necessary for this. So thanks to them. The update on the police, on the old station project, with the rain we had a couple weeks ago, the entire first floor was saturated. We had managed to keep that dry with the swimming pools up to that point, but I think the whole roof just flooded. And so to keep the mold down and to prevent further damage to the structure of the building, I asked someone to come in and remove the carpeting. In order to do the estimates for the second floor or for the roof, we need to be able to expose the ceiling and be able to look at all the roof members to see how much of it, some of it's damaged by years of water. And so we need to be able to look at all of it to be able to make sure that we get the proper estimates to replace the roof properly. So that's going on. You've probably seen the dumpsters outside. That has begun. The sewage lift stations, as you know, a couple of years ago, Fair Graham was asked to come up with plans, take a look at the sewage lift stations, and put together plans. Those are put into our facilities plan. They involved basically completely rebuilding all of the 4 lift stations that the city has. And that'd be soup to nuts, take out the tanks, put in new tanks, everything else. And I spoke to another engineer at Origin and said, this seemed a little odd. And they said, oh, I've never really seen all the lift stations have to be replaced at one time. And so I asked WHKS to come in and poke their head in there and take a look and give me their recommendation. They said that the tanks, the structure of the lift stations ranges from generally good to very good, and the condition on deterioration, the worst is no major signs of deterioration. As far as structure goes, then the Frentress station is many times too big because it was built for the boat. But instead of replacing that, they believe that we could partition it off and reduce the size of the lift station. So while we do need to replace the pumps and the rails and the electrical and electronics in them and various other things, we don't need to replace the main structure of the tanks, which should come as a pretty big savings and allow us to be able to move on those faster. Generally, the order of them, the one that's Hiawatha is still the one that's in the worst shape as far as the pumps, but apparently all the pumps were basically bought at the same time, and so the replacement is pretty close to the same time too. Any questions on that? It was kind of a lot. The sale of the water tower property, the survey has been done and submitted to the county. Now we can move ahead with the appraisal. And then I've already kind of given the financial update that with the close of April, our books are balanced and each month is caught up. So we are, for the first time in memory, I guess, caught up on our financials. And we would be ready, if we had our auditor, we would be ready to submit our documents to the auditor ahead of schedule. So that is what I have, Mayor.
All right, thank you. The only thing I have tonight, I wanted to ask the council between now and the next week or so, if you could, I'm looking for some feedback on the duplex. We sit here and we're coming down on properties that are dilapidated buildings and vacant buildings, and here we're sitting on this duplex. We did everything by the book. We listed it. We posted the notice. We had some people go through it, but nothing's happened, and we're kind of at a standstill. So I just want to get some feedback from the council, in the next week or so, some thoughts. Everybody just kind of think what your thoughts are on moving forward, what we can do with the duplex, because like I said, we're no better than anybody else if we're having a eyesore of a building just sitting there. So that's all I have for tonight. Alderperson report. Belkin?
Mr. Mayor, I only have one thing. I had some people approach me this past week about the trash not being picked up downtown after the car shows and that. And I explained to them that from last year to this year, we got 2 less employees there in Public Works, and they're doing the best they can. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Bergmeyer?
Nothing this week, Mayor.
Thank you. Degenhardt?
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
Thank you. Meyer?
Nothing.
Thank you. Roby?
Yeah, a couple things. Where do we stand with that bill collection through the state of Illinois? Did we get accepted for that, or have we not heard?
I think we've been accepted. The major portion of that was DACRA. Did they actually come back to us?
I haven't heard anything back on
Remember the back and forth. I can't remember what the status was most recently. We could check on that. A lot of that was DACRA related and went that direction, but we still have that available for our own fees, our ambulance and water.
That's what my next question was. Is that included in that?
I'll get an answer for you as quick.
Okay, and then, did we contract for any planning for the police department and the fire department yet for what we're gonna do with those? Have we?
I think we took it up a couple meetings ago for an initial contract for the basic. It's $5,000 to do
Do the design and stuff?
the rough design
Okay.
that would allow us to price things out and do the next step. So basically, the contract was, it's $5,000. If we end up going with a different contractor, then we have to pay the full bill, which is up to, I think, $25,000. But otherwise, it's just part of the overall design. And I think our discussion here was that Origin did the work with space
From
needs and all
previously,
those things. So-
right, okay. And then, I guess you answered this in your thing. We haven't moved ahead yet with the fire, or the police department roof yet then?
No.
Okay. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. City Attorney Hess?
Nothing to report tonight.
All right. Chief Gavasik is not here. Public Works. All right. Fire Chief Heim.
Fire Chief Hunt's not able to make it tonight. He's stranded along the road.
Okay.
So as chaplain, I'd like to do this for him.
Sure.
Tonight, we're gonna pin Lieutenant Elizabeth Heim. Lieutenant Elizabeth Heim.
Can you bring her to the front so we have her on the camera?
I wanted to be on this side.
Hang on. So Elizabeth Heim has been duly appointed position of lieutenant for the City of East Dubuque Fire Department. Your dedication to the job, to the city, and to the residents you serve, skill and drive which you have shown as a firefighter makes you deserving of this title as lieutenant. This certificate is awarded Monday, June 17th, 2024. Her mom and grandma will pin her.
Or grandma.
Grandma.
That's okay. So you get to hold. Oh, no, you're not holding. She's gonna say I can't, I forgot. Tell him to stop it. Making you laugh? I'm gonna make you laugh. Yeah. Get it through the shirt without stabbing her. I know I am. I'm trying not to stick her.
Now you see why I had her mom do it?
Oh my goodness. Okay, we're just gonna call it good, cause
Yeah,
that's,
that's good.
I got it as much as I could, okay. Yep, then we wanna put her thing. We can go down that way. Okay, I think whoever comes up with the idea. Oh.
I didn't eat my Cheerios today.
Okay, yeah, this might not happen.
Did you get yours?
No.
I don't want.
We need to make sharper pins.
Yeah, yes, we need sharper pins.
Yep.
Is it the stave?
You know what, we're gonna call one, cause I got the other part.
Just staple it on there.
Staple it? Jeff said we get to staple it on you. That can work too.
Oh my God.
There we go. And we'll stick those two behind there really good.
You might have to take it off and get home because I don't know.
Oh, it's not even, we're good. We'll call it good. Then we don't take up their meeting. your neck. I think it's one of
Most generally, women are pretty good at talking.
We've also got to gear up in a minute and a half.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And then we're done.
All right.
She's not doing a speech, I guess. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The other note that they had under Chief's thing was the new fire engine. I don't know if everybody had a chance to see it at all. That we got the new fire trucks in. Very nice. All right, 24-0614, speakers from the floor. We have none noted. We'll have some presentations. 24-0615, consent agenda.
Motion approved.
Roll call.
Falcon.
Aye.
Bergmeyer.
Aye.
Dagenhart.
Aye.
Fleur. Meyer.
Aye.
Roby.
Aye.
Old business, 24-0609, discussion and possible action to approve IEPA PWSL loan 17-6364, request number 2 in the amount of $10,000, including CFPS invoice number 2 in the city of East Dubuque. So this would be the one that we had tabled because we never had the invoice at the last meeting.
I'll make the motion to approve the IPES invoice.
I'll second that.
Roll call.
Bergmeyer.
Aye.
Dagenhart. Meyer.
Aye.
Roby.
Aye.
And Belkin.
Aye.
On to new business, 24-0616, presentation and discussion with DNR for stormwater study and flooding mitigation in the city of East Dubuque.
So Wes, the team from the DNR will be coming up. We kind of previewed this a few weeks ago, and then the DNR gave us a demonstration project with 3 inches of rain. Thank you for that.
No, we won't take any credit for that.
But we're anxious to hear both what you have to present to us on stormwater management here, but also how you and your resources may dovetail with other resources we could get and do some long-term good.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Bob, for introducing. My name is Wes Couture. I'm the Section Chief of Engineering Studies at IDNR, based out of Springfield, Illinois. This is Arthur Quasi, who served as the project engineer, and also with me tonight. I have Rick Coleman behind us, and he's our division manager. So as you probably are well aware, over a couple of years, we've been studying the East Dubuque watershed and the Wisconsin Avenue tributary, and here we're just going to kind of show you some of the findings we found in our report and how that is, I guess, combines with the statutes that we have to maybe provide some assistance. So I'll have Arthur start us off giving us some of the basic information, and I'll jump in and discuss some of the various things we looked at.
This is our presentation outline. We're going to look at the introduction, description of study area, site overview, and then the hydrology, hydraulics, the fire problems, and then we're going to look at identifying alternatives, assessment of alternatives, and we're going to do alternative comparisons and benefit cost ratios, and then conclusions and recommendation. Oops. Sorry. In this here we we had several studies which were performed. So in our study, these studies didn't give us a BC ratio. Now, our role as IG now, we had to dive in and then look at the alternatives which were provided, and then we came out with some BC ratios for the studies which were done previously. Under site overview, we're going to look. IDNR came on ground and then did a feasibility study, and then we looked around on the and then these are the findings that we came across. This is the drainage upstream. It was clogged, but it required some maintenance. And on the left, also that one was not so good. So we observed that it required maintenance or rebuilding.
Try. See if I can get this started. Okay. It does hop around. Okay.
Yeah. Then downstream, we see the drainage silted on the 3rd Street. We're looking at the state of the infrastructure. You can look at the embankment of the channel on the 3rd Street has deteriorated and it needs to be reconstructed.
Does the keyboard work function a little better?
I think so.
I apologize.
They used to use a
Down
forward
there.
back.
Let's just see if that's
Forward back.
There we go.
The hydrology, we had to update the old precipitation data using the Bulletin 75, which the updated Bulletin 75 to run our model. And this is how our HMS looked like. And the existing conditions using the updated bulletin values, this is the data that we gathered from our analysis. Next. And the hydraulics, we did update the model which was prepared by HDR and WHKS. We had to just do some tweaking and improved the profiles. And these ground elevations, we're trying to look at how the flows look like. The elevations of the area of study, we're looking at 800 to 600. It's a steep gradient over a short distance. Next. The flood problems. In this area, we did sample in the area of study. The number of structures of study, we got about 161 structures, and then vehicles, we had 111 that we brought into our damage model to do the analysis to know the data that we needed to use in our analysis. These are some of the graphs that are embedded in the model that we used for the damage analysis that helps us to compute the capitalized damages.
So let me just take a minute here, because I think the big focus of what IDNR was asked to do was to look at the economics to find out how much funding the state of Illinois could provide to this. So what we did, that Arthur alluded to, is we took that WHKS study and kind of brought it up to date. There's new precipitation data based on recent rainfall that kind of had to be updated, which required us to update the hydraulics model, measuring how deep the water was throughout the area. And then we take all that to find out how much flood impact is happening in the community. So if you look here, let me see if I can get the mouse to show up. Maybe not. Let me just go real quick here and do this, because I understand this is a little confusing, but this will help you understand a little bit of what's going on here. So by looking at the probability of rainfall to occur, that's this top graph here, and that's how much flow comes down the channel based its probability of occurring. So the heavier the rain, the less likely it's going to occur, but the more volume we have of water we have to deal with. We compare that with our hydraulics model that looks at the stage, how deep that water gets versus that discharge. So that's what, when we say hydraulics, that's how we determine that. And so then we take these two to correlate a probability versus stage. And this is really saying how likely is it for the water to get so high, which is what causes flood damages. So we take that stage or that height versus probability and take that with what we call structure damage information. So the deeper the water, the more flood damage a property or a home gets. So we take that probability of occurrence and kind of convert that to probability of a damage amount of structure. And from that, that gives us a probability of how much damage will occur within the community, which is what we call an average annual damages. We say, what's the average annual damage amount that's likely to happen to a community, whether it be a 100-year flood, a 10-year flood, or like what you saw here recently, which was probably a little bit less than that recently. So whenever we talk, we'll talk about average annual damages so that we can use that as a comparison of what's happening today versus what could happen with some of the scenarios that we're looking at. So just want to take a moment. I apologize for coming up here, but I figured I wanted to walk through that a little bit just so you understand how we're deriving some of this data.
With the existing conditions, that's what we call the do-nothing condition. We came up with $2.7 million as damages for the capitalized costs.
So one thing we want to point out here is if you look, that top line in the graph is showing the 100-year. So if you guys are familiar with a FEMA flood map, that's the same thing that you would see in a FEMA flood map. And that's showing that a total of 36 buildings would be damaged during a 100-year flood and 31 vehicles. So we looked at both structures, as houses, and vehicles that were damaged during this event. You follow that line over and you see there'd be about $1 million worth of damages during that event. And as you move down, that's more frequent but less severe events until you move down below the 1 and you see the total average annual damages for 67 structures. That's the 36 buildings and the 31 vehicles. Then that's saying the average annual damage amount for the community would be roughly around $80,000 every given year. So now we've taken that data and we found, well, where's all the damages happening at? What's the problems? We can look at our modeling. And from there, we look at a variety of alternatives. So each of these boxes is something that we looked at as a kind of what-if scenario. So alternative 1 is what happens if we do nothing. We kind of showed you the results. That would continue and likely get worse as we see precipitation events increasing in intensity and frequency. And then we'll go through each of these other 12 alternatives that we are considering. So the first thing that we looked at, what we're calling alternative 2, is just maintenance. And that's cleaning out all the sediment in that channel, as you see here. As you look in that very top left picture of the corner, you can go out there today, and that box is almost completely jammed full of sediment. So what ends up happening is those boxes kind of fill up with water, but they can't empty out. So that could be part of the driving reason why you see water bubbling up at the top of the street, coming down the street, because it doesn't have an outlet for that water to move into this channel. So that's one of the big things. Well, what happens if we just went and cleaned out that channel? What would be the benefits? That's the first thing we looked at. The third, fourth, and fifth considerations were reservoirs. So we were tasked to look at the WHKS study, which was including a reservoir near the school area in Old Dump Road. So we definitely wanted to look at that. When we looked at that, we had to adjust the location because we found elevation-wise we couldn't get to work. We were putting water onto private property, and the bank dam, it just wouldn't fit in that exact location for the height based on the new rainfall data we have. So the WHKS study was done before that new rainfall was provided. We have to go with the latest rainfall data, so that kind of forced us to move that reservoir up, and that's denoted by that yellow star on the map. We also want to consider some other locations as well. Alternative 4, where we're calling the stable detention, which is kind of that magenta purple star. That's kind of at the northmost end of Old Dump Road. And then we also looked at further detention with the 2 green, what we're calling the 2 detentions, if we kind of split and move further out, so we impacted less property, private property that way, and existing structures. And finally, at the very bottom, the red star, or we call Apple Street detention, is if we provide detention on that tributary coming off the side. So those are just some of the detention options we looked at. And so these are just kind of a show of how deep that water would be at each of those locations, its footprint of essentially that reservoir. Now these would be dry bottom most of the time, but whenever they would flood, we have to make sure we're aware of what would actually get inundated in this reservoir. So this is just a quick overview of what those look like. Additionally, we looked at the 2 detentions location and the Apple Street detention. You can see we don't have the depth on that, and I'll get more into that on why these were excluded from the full study as well. Another consideration we went was to raising the embankment side along 3rd Street to kind of confine that water more in that channel. There's an option. Alternative 8 looked at rerouting that sewer or pressure pipe in there. As you know, that pressure pipe sitting in the middle of the channel and takes up a significant capacity of that channel. It also can cause problems for maintenance of that channel. So we wanted to look at what happens if we put that underneath the 3rd Street Road to see if that would create greater benefits to the community. So as you can see here, there's also 9 through 13. These eventually kind of were also investigated, expanding the conveyance of Wisconsin Avenue, essentially increasing the size of that channel, elevating buildings along with the upstream detention. What happens if we could raise the 1st floor elevation of the buildings so that when the water would come into that flats area or that leveed section of town, the structures wouldn't receive water in their actual 1st floor. We also looked at some buyout options as well, as I think that has been done previously in the town. Is that a viable option just to let's get the structures out of that flood-prone area? Is that cheaper than doing all these improvements? And you can see that's kind of what makes up this alternative 9 through 13. We looked at some combinations of those alternatives as well to see what would potentially work best. So next we're going to go into the evaluation. Now that we kind of talked about what they are, how did they perform whenever we run these hypothetical rainfall events through the community? So the first one is sediment removal. And the key things I want you to look at, obviously the graph on the left side is how much the DNR can contribute to the fund and how much it would cost the city. Because alternative 2 is strictly maintenance, that's not something that the state can fund. But what I also want you to focus at in the bottom right or underneath that right-hand table, there's BC was a 20.88. And what that is for us to have, we can fund a project in its entirety if that number is 1.0 or greater. So what we're really looking at was, well, how efficient for the dollar is that project? So as we can see, just removing that sediment, we have a great amount of benefits by removing that sediment versus the cost of that project. And you can see in the charts on the right, we talk about, well, at the different storm events The second and third columns are existing. The last two on the right are what happens if this project was implemented. So just by cleaning out that culvert, we can save 5 structures from getting flooded. And that doesn't include the flooding that's decreased, although not removed, for the other structures as well. So with that, then we look at the old dump road detention, and as you can see, that benefit cost ratio is 0.57, meaning that the benefits that we create by having this, the flood damage reduction that's created by this project, what we're calling the benefits, the DNR can fund $1.8 million. Based on that, the benefits generated by this scenario. But that does, at our cost estimates, with the project cost being about $3.1 million, that would leave $1.3 million to still be covered by the city. And you can see that there's even more structures removed or benefited by this alternative. Just moving through, alternative 4, the stable detention, or further upstream, you see a little bit less benefit for the community, which would mean that the DNR is still around 1.8, but there's a higher cost to the city for that alternative. There's a number of alternatives that we, at preliminary evaluation, were kind of kicked out of the full study because we found that they weren't really economic justified. They kind of went further down that trend of being a higher cost to the community, and the DNR could provide a lower amount for the funding of that project. So this is just a quick synopsis of why some of these alternatives, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, were all kicked out. Essentially, it's because there are better options to these. We looked at rerouting the sewer again. This did have the most amount of funding that the DNR could provide, up to $1.9 million. But again, just the cost of replacing the street, moving that whole storm sewer line over, became a very expensive cost for this project. And you can see the number that the city would have to provide for that project. Now, this is assuming there's no other funding outside of the IDNR Office of Water Resources. We also looked at what happens if we elevate those structures and pull the structures above that water elevation. You'll see there's not as much that DNR can provide, and that's because we're still seeing damages. All the buildings, if you look at that third column in the table, all the buildings no longer get flooded, but all the vehicles still do. We still have all the problems outside of the structures, the buildings, homes getting flooded. And then lastly, we looked at buyouts, and this is almost a $3 million project, a $2.6 million project. This did have a VC of over 1, which is why you see no cost to the city. And this buys out all the buildings. That assumes that all the structure or all the vehicles won't be parked in those areas anymore along those homes, and that those would all go to 0. Again, buyouts are very contentious. A lot of people may not want their home bought out and have to relocate and find new housing elsewhere. But it is a viable option if the city would want to pursue that option. So this is just a quick summary table of the different costs, construction costs, the benefits provided that essentially the DNR can fund, and then what that VC ratio is for what we see as the most viable options based on this study. I won't go over those one by one. You can kind of see how those kind of stack up against each other. Again, that sediment removal, that maintenance of the channel has a tremendous benefit for the cost to the community. So some of the conclusions and recommendations. I mean, first and foremost, we always recommend the maintenance of the channel. Having that cost of removing that sediment, whether that's dropping down some equipment in that channel and just digging out that channel. There is some question on the structural stability of those walls and how much could we excavate out there. So that is a concern, but we do recommend that that sediment be removed. Alternative 3 is, if the city is really seeking some detention and reducing the amount of flow coming through town, then that would be a viable option that the DNR could help assist funds with. Again, alternative 4, if you didn't want to have the impact to that property, you could go further upstream, look at the detention above that stable end or above that Old Dump Road location. Lastly, the option to consider buyouts in that lower flats area that's primarily protected by the levee. So with that, I'll kind of open it up to questions. Bob and I talked about this for a little bit, so Bob, I don't know if you want to interject anything or lead any discussion, but I will say, it's really difficult, the setting that we have in this community, how the main channel runs right down the middle of that street. We looked at if, there's more room under that street to put more infrastructure, more culverts. We have the culvert already buried. We have other utilities running up and down that street, so we're really kind of limited in what we could do for that street. So those were. Bob, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, well, thank you. I think part of the maintenance problem we discussed was, if you bring up a picture of that culvert, this is what Public Works is saying. There you go. So getting in here, you can take some of this with a small excavator or something, but getting this, and now it's sort of, since the last storm, is pretty much over top of that. And even taking it off the top of this concrete tube is potentially problematic. And this is 72 inches, so you would assume that you could get down pretty far, if you could get down pretty far. But you can't put a piece of equipment over it, and you can't put a piece of equipment on the far side of it. And so it really is a design issue of that culvert. So I think it's a situation that can be improved, but I don't have a good answer for how we can actually restore that culvert to its original shape. And then you get into a series of issues. Once you do that, as you mentioned, Wes, you're going to increase the likelihood of collapse from of the sides. So you really need to approach that issue. Of the 3 bridges, we only have 1 open to cars over that area. And what we ran into with this last storm, that what goes beyond damage is, with that storm we had, the city was cut in half. And so our ability to respond to a fire, an ambulance call, anything like that, is severely restricted by those things. The worst case scenario, the nightmare for us, is if the flooding were to cause a train to stop, and the flooding came down Wisconsin Avenue, this city is split into 3 pieces, and you can't get from any one piece to any other piece. When the train stops along this track, there is no way to access the flats. And so there's some issues like that kind of go beyond just the economics of it. And so that's one issue, and one thing that makes it kind of a bigger issue than just flooding. I think the upstream fixes are good to look at, and I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about it. If you guys have done much coordination with DOT, for instance, on being able to combine resources with DNR, DOT, and local.
Yeah, I think as Bob and I talked about in the past, is that, IDNR is kind of limited by what's called the Flood Control Act of 1945 that really limits how much money we can spend on a project. I think there's other opportunities. The particularly maybe with IEMA, especially if we talked about Illinois Emergency Management Agency, talking about the concerns of, having that access cut off to the communities, a big concern. And so there may be opportunity for other grant funding that could supplement what potentially DNR could find. But I think it's a bigger picture than just flooding in itself. There's a lot of infrastructure problems. Like we said, well, we could probably drop a bobcat in that channel, clean out that one side. But at what point are we worried about that wall blowing out? Right now, we walk that, you can see where water goes down through the pavement and shoots out the wall. It's just a matter of time, honestly, before that whole thing collapses. We talked about, well, do we just rip out 3rd Street right along that channel to widen it out so we have more area there? You're cutting off access to maybe a couple of homes there. But those are larger city decisions of this is going to impact some residents if you want to make some real solutions. But otherwise, this is going to be a tough scenario to maintain as it is today.
I'd like to bring something up, being you're talking about it. I've been here a long time, and I remember years ago, before they put that tube in the street, we didn't have a lot of trouble. That thing would fill up and be gone. Now we get these floods that come down through, and that tube in the street can't take it.
Well, that's because
There's no way to get in there. I don't know how you get in there to clean it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could drop a bobcat down in it.
I mean, inside the tube.
Oh, inside
Inside the force main.
That's what I'm saying, the
Yeah,
water.
so what has happened is because if you look in that top left picture, that silt is about 6 inches from the top. So all that is just backing out further and further and further up that top. So you can get a contractor to come in and clean out that tunnel. We can't obviously get in there to see how far up that sediment goes up those box culverts, but that would be part of it. And if you have that sediment being able to be washed out, I'm guessing it's going to take a lot of maintenance, either going up and actively pulling it out, or at least clearing a path so it can wash out. Right now, it has nowhere to go. And that's why everything's coming down that street. Not that you wouldn't have that problem during really big events, but, and we haven't run the numbers because it just happened a couple of weeks ago. We could find out how much flow was actually coming down from that recent event. I'm guessing if this was cleaned out, that would have stayed all in those box culverts because it wasn't a huge event. If you look, you guys had like 2.5 inches. Maybe 3 inches.
3 a day.
I'm not over how long did it rain for?
The 2.5 was probably over an hour.
Yeah, an hour.
And then we had about a half inch an hour or two before that.
Yeah. So you'll find that during a 100-year, that's more like 6 inches in an hour.
We've had
So I think those boxes have a lot more capacity than what they have there today. And you could have, and by maintaining this, you may not have had any over street flow during that last event if this would have been maintained. I understand it's very difficult to maintain, but that's why I think a long-term solution or multiple funding sources come together to find out what is a system that we can create in this town that can be maintained.
And you're right about the walls, they're in bad shape.
Yeah,
And that's a big expense if we gotta replace that.
I agree.
'Cause they're ready to come down.
some of it did, but if we clean that channel out there, how many years we're looking before it silts back in again? I mean, that'd be a constant
Well, that's
maintenance.
maintenance, yeah.
Huh?
It's supposed to be maintained. Well, I'll say one of the big things, anytime you have, 1/2 inch, 1 inch rain, so you check those inlets to those structures at the top of the street to make sure those are cleaned out, because if those things get clogged, it
Water
doesn't
comes
matter
over top.
what this channel looks like, those have to be cleaned out on a regular basis.
Yeah. I mean, never.
Often we find those get clogged and it's just something quick and easy that you go send somebody down there for a half an hour to throw a bunch of branches in the back of a truck and haul off. But this channel still has to be addressed because if that water can get in the box culverts, it has to have a place to go out. and right now it doesn't have a place to go.
We had a backhoe up the street
Yeah.
pulling branches out during the storm.
Yeah, and you'll still have stuff coming in during the storm.
Yeah,
so
that's
you'll
what-
still
as it
have
was coming
that,
in, as
but
it
it
was-
won't fill up as quickly and it won't bubble over as fast if that's the case. So we had the entire fire department here on this side of the water. It took the police chief driving out into the township and around to come in. And then I think he was the only city person on the other side of Wisconsin. So, that's not a great position to be in. But I think the answer is, both finding a way to do what we can on the maintenance, but then also the long-term solution is gonna be coordination among multiple agencies, because these are big problems. Yeah, the difficult thing, especially with the retaining walls along this channel, is, that's not IDOT property. They won't get involved with that. So unless it has a number for the street name, like, Highway 20 or something like that, it's not their property and we won't be able to get some assistance. I think it would be beneficial to reach out to IEMA and maybe your county hazard mitigation manager and just see if there's some available funds there to help with this. But, it's more than just a flood problem, it's an infrastructure problem as well. And that's why IDNR in itself can't solve this problem, because there's just too many issues at hand. You got the silt and the lack of maintenance, you got the infrastructure that's starting to crumble, and trying to do one thing just gets so expensive so quickly, because you got multiple problems you're trying to solve. So say that we'd be happy to continue to work with the city, but I think we need to maybe see if we can find other funding sources, other grant opportunities to work with and maybe help supplement.
So
some of
Wisconsin Avenue is Highway 35, of course, and it is the water coming down there is their water, but I understand.
You can't dump your water on somebody else's property, right?
Yeah, but Third Street is not, so if we need to do work on Third Street, IDOT wouldn't be able to assist with Third Street.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time. Bob has all of our contact information. If you guys have any follow-up questions or want to pursue other efforts, please let us know. We'd love to help out and willing to continue our efforts in the project. I don't want it to seem like we're just walking away. We just know there's needs to be a bigger solution.
And we definitely need to move forward looking for solutions. I mean, it's obvious we do have some major issues to address, so thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, just throw a couple $1 million out there.
Every time they flush the toilet.
Well, first thing is, do what we can do. I don't know how much that'll be though.
You can see the riff raff.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Was it 2010? You got the 13 inches? Yeah.
It's cheaper to move the whole town.
Yeah.
All right, 24-0617 is going to be deleted from tonight's agenda and will be added to the July 1st meeting. They were not able to attend tonight's meeting. So we'll move on. 24-0618, discussion and possible action to approve an ordinance to allow the city clerk to serve concurrently and also as the city treasurer for the city of East Dubuque.
can give a little bit of an introduction on the purpose of these ordinances tonight. So they're being introduced this evening to serve to clarify that there's no conflict of duty between the city clerk and the treasurer. So there's a question out there as to whether or not those positions are incompatible under Illinois law. And in order to avoid any possible problems with that, we've drafted these ordinances. And what we're going to be, just to be on the safe side, because none of the duties that Pam currently does as the treasurer and the city clerk are incompatible, but there's a question under the current Illinois law that they could potentially be. So these ordinances being introduced tonight clarify that there's no conflict of duty between the clerk and the treasurer as they are defined. And so going forward, I think what we'll probably do is just kind of, because this is a kind of a new role where we have a dual position, city clerk and treasurer, we just have to make sure that they're not incompatible. So we're going to be working with Bob and also with Pam to make sure that there's no kind of overlap in any of those issues. So these proposed ordinances should address that matter, and we'll continue to refine and streamline the city administration kind of like the way that we have been, but we want to make sure that it's not incompatible. So these ordinances just kind of make that very clear. So any question on any of that?
Your position is elected, is that correct?
City clerk is, yes.
Yes.
So we could get into a problem where all at once, you know, she gets voted out of office and the new person come in, can't balance the checkbook, her own. So then we'd have to, then what do we do?
So this doesn't connect the two positions in the code. This allows the council the option to have the same person
Do both
jobs, but it doesn't combine the jobs.
Okay. Yeah, I just was thinking that, you know, it's a possibility, we never know.
Well, and just to give you an example, so for instance, if the chief of police, which is, you know, that appointed position, were to run for city council and was elected, those two positions would be incompatible.
Yeah.
Because the chief of police would have to consider budget items and other issues that impact what he does, and so that would be a conflict. So her position is a little bit different. We don't run into those types of conflicts. The way that we've defined her administration as the treasurer does not conflict with anything she does as a city clerk. And so these ordinances just serve to clear that up and basically say that they're not incompatible positions the way that we have them set up.
And that by making them part of the chain of command here through the city manager, they both report to the city manager, which takes them out of overlapping responsibilities themselves.
I wasn't worried about that. I was just thinking about, you know, being an elected position.
I still have a concern on one person doing 3 different jobs. I don't know how that's possible.
Well, we've been basically functioning this way through the budget, and we're going to keep an eye on Pam.
Well, and with the other, you know, position of the outside person, I think that is really the solution that has helped us streamline the treasurer's position to only, you know, have certain defined duties.
Given the new software and the other, so we have added the outside contract person, but we've also added the chief of police and the public works director, and really the manager into a regular daily budget, you know, finance responsibilities. So, given that and the fact that Pam and Des were doing most of the work we're talking about here before, it's not as much of a leap as it would seem from the outside. I agree that it is a challenge, and you know, we need to watch it, but I think if you saw the activity that Tony and Luke have on a daily basis watching their budgets, that was really, those responsibilities were focused solely on the people who were handling the bank accounts and writing the checks and taking in the money. And now we have people responsible for their own budget line by line, and it takes a lot of pressure off. Even if we had the treasurer, it takes a lot of pressure off the people doing the work back here. I want to speak for Pam if she wants to. It seems to be pretty well oiled at the moment with these guys.
Yeah.
So we need a motion, right?
Right, let's get her.
We have two separate ordinances, so.
Yep.
I'll second it.
All right, roll call.
Belkin,
Aye.
Meyer, Roby,
Nay.
Belkin,
Already, aye.
sorry, Bergmeyer,
Aye.
and Degenhardt.
All right. 24-0619, discussion and possible action to approve an ordinance to allow the city treasurer to serve concurrently and also as the city clerk for the city of East Dubuque.
Again, this is the similar ordinance, just
Yeah,
with the
it's-
opposite title position.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Roll call.
Meyer. Roby,
Nay.
Belkin,
Aye.
Bergmeyer,
Aye.
Degenhardt.
24-0620, motion to adjourn. Second. Roll call.
Roby,
Aye.
Belkin,
Aye.